topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good evening, listeners. I know it's been a couple of weeks we have not got together. And I want to share that because of Louisiana, because of Ida, we had technical difficulties. So that's why you've not seen us. And our prayers and hearts go out to folks in Louisiana. They've gone through so much devastation. So folks, it's exciting to be back with you. And a couple of items that I'd love to share with you. For those of you who have purchased our books, thank you, because part of the profits are going to COVID impacted entrepreneurs, and it'll be great for those of you who have not got the books. So one of our books is just kind of listed below, Expert to Influencer. Regardless whether you are in corporate world, you're an entrepreneur, you are a student. Who doesn't want to unpack influence and drive impact? So folks, that's what you get to learn in this book. How to be an influencer, not by the number of likes, not by the number of followers, but the impact even on one person. So folks, for those of you who have not got it, get your copy and help us help entrepreneurs. And last but not the least, I do want to invite you to spend 1 hour of your time every month. Just 1 hour helping others, no strings attached. And think about it. Even if only 100 million people in the US did that, we are talking 100 million hours every month. Think how much we could achieve it, folks. So take that time and share it with someone else. So let's invite our guests, Justin and Jim.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, good evening. And, we have listeners from all across the world. So, folks, it may be morning time, your time. So it doesn't matter. Morning, afternoon, evening. So welcome, folks.
How's it going?
Going great. How are you all?
Good.
We're doing all right. It's been an interesting day so far.
A little warm here in Arizona, but that's okay.
Well, I'm sure, hopefully you have not been experiencing the wildfires that we have been hearing about.
Not too terribly. Even when we were in California, we didn't encounter too many issues with fires. There were some further up north about a month or two ago, but so far things seem to have been going all right, as good as they can be with a forest fire anyway.
Well, that's good. We will be keeping all those folks in prayers who may have lost their homes or have been impacted by those.
Always, yeah.
Yep.
So let's get started. So I'm going to invite you, Justin, and doesn't look like you're being too far from your childhood, or maybe you just have a young face.
Not that far. It's been about 10, 15 years since I guess you'd call childhood.
Yeah, I guess.
You got to ask him.
I don't know. It depends.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Your dad is sitting right next to you, and we'll find out. So do you recall a moment in your childhood, and let's talk about under 10, where, you were thinking, yeah, it's so much fun, and either it was so much fun that you remember it to this day as if it was crisp and, and as if it had happened just yesterday. Or it was something that left a mark on you where you're carrying that skill set or memory or lesson even today.
Younger than 10 with a skill set that's carried through.
I think for me, it's almost every day. I mean, I'm in the financial planning service business. Justin's my partner, and working together is a lot of fun every day. But just this week alone, we've had some clients with some catastrophes, and helping these people out. I mean, you get such joy out of it. And everybody thinks financial services and investing and all that, but the reality is, the bottom line is, you're helping people. You're helping them with retirement. You're helping when somebody passes away. You're helping them plan for the future. Us, obviously, we got a big focus on college planning. I mean, helping your child get to college and be cost effective in doing it almost every day.
Let me ask you, were you doing financial planning when you were under 10? The question was for Justin.
Oh.
Let him speak.
I jumped in on him.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's what happens when you do presentations sometimes. But no, younger than 10, a skill set that's carried through. Starting at those ages, I started doing a lot of athletics, started doing a lot of music. Both those things, you start learning study disciplines for all sorts of manners in terms of how you learn stuff. And I would say that the building blocks of how you go about trying to learn a piece of music, learn a new skill set in a sport has carried through. I mean, just last week, he took me out to go play this new sport, pickleball, that's new to me. And this is, for me, it kind of was easy to pick up the sport because going all the way back to those learning fundamentals of sports when I was very young, they carry through, the tennis, the racquetball, the baseball, all those things, and being able to just adapt to the different rules has been able to carry through. So I would say those learning skills and those basic fundamentals, whether they're, physical coordination, when it comes to music, I would say that had an influence on math, different learning skills, practice skills, having the discipline to be able to build things from the ground up. I think those are some of the skills that really carry through from those early ages in those disciplines.
Well, Justin, you're absolutely right. And it's amazing, so many kids nowadays overlook sports because there's too much into the virtual, and especially, a couple of years have not done anything for us in the sense that we can bring a whole lot of people together, least of all the teams. I mean, of course, things are opening up. But that said, when you're talking about sports, it's so critical to bring sports in our kids' lives today. And from what it sounds like, Jim, you might have played sports as well in your young life.
Yeah, it's going back a ways, but I still play pickleball and played basketball until my 50s. I do active bike riding when I can because I did have an Achilles issue recently, but I'm working my way through that. And I was a long distance runner for 21 years. So but Justin's definitely got more athletic ability than I ever had.
I don't know. He actually had a Grease moment when he was first getting to know my mom. He actually used to run hurdles in high school, and she was in the stands, and he completely crashed and burned right in front of her, just like in the movie Grease.
Yeah, so, pretty much.
He completely did that one.
So how did that pan out with your mom?
We've been married 43 years, been together 50 years. So I think it's worked out pretty well. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. She saw you crash, and she's like, okay, I can handle that.
She didn't offer any Band-Aids, if I remember correctly.
Well, that's awesome. So Jim, kind of tell me, as you were growing up, what was your passion? Did you know what you wanted to be as you moved through college? And what was your major, or there was no major? And what led you to the finances?
Well, when I was younger, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I liked business. My dad was an engineer at IBM. I didn't have the skill sets for that. I didn't have the patience for it, frankly. And for me, I decided I like aviation. So I went to college. I'm doing business in aviation. But then my family circumstances, I had to choose aviation or my degree because of finances at the time. So I chose my degree. And after that, I've always been a worker. I've always worked since I was 12 years old. And so I just started working in the business world. And I got into working for some companies doing recruiting, and then the customer services, and I ended up working for HP for 17 years. And from that, I decided I've always been a planner. Took that after my mom, I guess. But I've always planned on things in advance, so it's always worked well in my life. And I decided in my 40s to go into financial planning. So I left Hewlett Packard and started my practice. And I was fortunate enough that my son decided to join me a few years later. So that's been my passion for the last 20 years. And when we started doing this college planning stuff, which is for me about 18 years ago now, that's been our passion. And we just really enjoy helping families because it helps you understand the finances and helps minimize the impact on your long-term planning for retirement and those kinds of things. And then seeing what happens every day with helping people, it's just an amazing career. I always tell new people getting into financial services, however, if you're getting in for the money, stay out. We don't want you. We want you there for the passion. We want you there because you really want to help families. And if you put that primarily as your target, you'll make good money. And that's kind of how we look at the business.
Absolutely. No, definitely a great point. So you talked about that you have been a worker since you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that time.
Well, back then, didn't have work papers till you were 14. It was cutting hedges. It was doing snow shoveling. I grew up outside of New York City, and when it snowed, it's funny, when you go to school, you had to force yourself to get up when it snowed. You got up early because you're out there shoveling sidewalks, making money. And then in the summer, cutting hedges, cutting grass, doing all kind of chores for neighbors and relatives. And it just didn't stop. And then from there, I started doing work. I worked at IBM cleaning floors at night. I worked in a movie theater as an usher. My fun job, frankly, was working as a shipping clerk at a small company. It was just a lot of fun for me as I worked my way through college. Even at college, I washed dishes, I cleaned floors, I tended bar. I've always done everything I could to number one is I learned a lot of work ethics, and number two is look for opportunity. So when I left the college and I didn't really have a job lined up, it didn't bother me any because I knew I would find a job and I would do something on it. And
I really like that point, and I gotta share with you. Probably, 2008, 2009, just like any other industry, the industry that I was working in was also prone to layoffs. And the rumor mill was, of course, super active, and everybody's like, oh, layoffs are going to happen. This is going to be there. And one of my coworkers said, it doesn't matter if I get laid off because I can do any job. And that is so powerful because, if you are willing to get down and knowing that there is pride in any type of work that you do, then that opens a lot of doors. So, folks, looks like we may have lost our guests. Hopefully, they will be hopping on back again soon. So, let's just kind of continue the conversation. We were talking about working at different jobs and what ethics and what discipline does it bring to you. So here's what I gotta share, that it is important to have that work ethics. Doesn't matter what job you're in. It's about how are you showing up. It's about how are you serving others. Because regardless, no matter whatever job you're in, there is somebody at the end of your job who is benefiting from you. There is somebody at the end of your job who is getting impacted by it. And here's like a couple of stories that I want to share with you. So for example, I used to work for so folks,
we're back. Don't know what happened.
Yeah, well, technology happens. So it's continuing on a story about work ethics. So I used to work at a ophthalmologist's office, and I used to help people figuring out how to wear contact lens. I was in college, and when you're in college, it's like, gosh, how much did I make? It was probably like $5 an hour. And now it's, and folks, of course, that's some like good, probably it was in California, maybe $93 93, 94, somewhere around that. And I would be so happy because I was making probably like, hours are not that many. And I made, gosh, don't know, like maybe $40 a week. And just getting that first paycheck or from any of that, so much pride in it. And that's one of the things that I want to drive home is that it doesn't matter what work you're doing. If you really show up, because there were so many people who would come to the clinic so scared, oh gosh, I don't want to put on the contact lens, I would have fun with them and teach them. So it doesn't matter what your job is, you can make an impact. So Jim, you were talking about you have done a lot of different types of work. So
Yep.
tell us, what did you learn from it?
I'm sorry, ask that question again.
What did you learn from the different types of work you did?
I think the one thing is discipline, showing up, working with other people. How to get along with other personalities that maybe normally you don't get along with, and how to work through those confrontations at times. And really didn't have a lot of issues with that. You just have to be more flexible, and you have to be willing to listen, and they have to be willing to listen too. So I think that's probably the interpersonal skills that I needed to work on at the time, and did a pretty good job at, I think. Those are the things I think is showing up and putting the effort in, putting the extra effort in too. I mean, there was times when I was recruiting a lot of people where I'd start at 7 a.m. and if I finished at 9 at night, that was kind of my average day. So that's kind of how it was. Where today it's tough when you talk to employers when some of the people are trying to recruit, they're saying, well, you mean I have to show up at 8 o'clock and we have to be there every day? It's amazing to me. They just don't have that discipline. And you wonder why we have people that can't keep jobs, and that's one of the reasons. You have to go above and beyond. So,
well, that's one philosophy. Now let's talk with Justin. Justin, did you have a chance to do any odd jobs while you were growing up?
So when I was growing up, I was always told that my job was school. I was in every advanced placement class you can think of since I was in second or third grade. So that meant a lot of very interesting side projects when I was in elementary school, a lot of extra classes in junior high school, because I was also, in bands. I was in on the baseball team as well as in these classes. So I didn't have a lot of opportunity for work when I was in as a kid all the way through high school. But that being said, I did have a lot of chores that I did around the house and things like that. When I would come home from college, I had a lot of very interesting projects that I did, from designing and rebuilding the fences around the house, redoing all the screen doors, helping paint different parts of the house. Heck, when I was a kid, I helped them redo a lot of the tile around the house. So just because I wasn't doing an official job as a kid, that certainly didn't mean that I was not associated with
fences
work.
for the neighbors.
Did fences with the neighbors. Yeah. But once I graduated high school, my dad had a client who was looking for an extra guy who was doing landscaping and construction in Universal Studios in Southern California, doing all the stuff on the Universal City Walk, all the surrounding landscaping, things like that. So whereas everyone else, when they graduated, they went to a graduation party and stuff like that, I went home to sleep because I had to be up before the crack of dawn to drive down to Universal Studios for the entire summer to go there and, pick weeds, do landscaping. At one point, they had me hung upside down doing concrete work all the way through. Oh yeah, I got some interesting jobs. The tiling came in hot. I was regrouting tile on the Universal Studios City Walk. A lot of those skills ended up coming handy just in the very first job I had. Going into college, I did people's laundry. That was my first job. I went there and said, okay, what can I do to have an on-campus job? I was doing people's laundry. I was working for half of minimum wage at a local bar as a bar back just to make extra money, hoping we got good enough tips where I could get some extra money from there. Heck, from that job, I learned a bunch of recipes that I now make for family and friends and things like that. So, I've been in kitchens, done dishes, done laundry, done all those things, which also led me, because I was always willing to help out, I was retrieving balls on the sidelines. I was videotaping sports games at the college for the coaches. I even became the announcer for all the basketball teams for the girls and the guys. So it ended up leading to a lot of different jobs, because when people see that you're willing to work, you're willing to show up, it does open up some opportunities for you. But even then, I did have to learn some skills, because sometimes when you're juggling a lot of stuff, sometimes you might lax a little bit on being completely on time. And that was a lesson that I had to learn the hard way when I was in college. So definitely not a stranger to work going all the way through college. And he probably had some of the more fun jobs because he had bar backing and things like that. I was being hung upside down in electrical vaults to do concrete work. So
but that on-campus work also got us some extra scholarship as a senior year in college too.
This is true.
Well, you've got interesting stories to tell, and maybe you'll be sending me some recipes for some cocktails.
He's got a couple good ones.
He's more the cocktails guy. I'm more if you want recipes for marinating meats.
Okay, well, that goes well, right? Have a good dinner and have a drink that matches with it. So perfect. So folks, we have talked about work ethics and all that. This is good. And what happens is that when you are a college student, and I'm sure, neither of you are stranger to that, it's one of the sweetest times in life, and yet one of the hardest times, because I still remember back being in college, and just, even if I had to do a tutoring job or whatever job you are doing, you want to take on those jobs while you are studying. And of course, like you said, that just going to school is enough. It's a lot of pressure. I mean, that itself in itself is work. Not only that, but you're adjusting to completely new, different lifestyle. So given that nowadays, as everybody knows, the tuition fees keep on going up, and it can be a huge burden on the families and on students who are coming out. So let's look at it from two different perspectives. Let's look at first, as families, what strategies they can put in place so that when students are coming out, they're not coming out with 100,000 or 200,000, depending on where they're going, large sums of debts.
So to start off with, the first thing I want to do is put into perspective the college cost that a family actually pays. So in the news, everyone always hears about the high cost of college, the rising student debt, and those are the common things that people see in the media. But when you look at how families actually pay for school, the reality can be quite different. So if I have a mom and dad, they're sending a brilliant kid, top 5 in her class, she's done really well in the tests, she's earned a high quality education. And this particular young lady I'm thinking of, she really wants to go to Harvard or Brown, and she wants to do pre-med.
Mm-hmm.
These are $75,000 a year schools.
Right.
And so, as to your point, how do you go to this school and not have $100,000, $200,000 in debt? Well, what people don't know is that those schools don't straight out charge you that list price. There are applications that you do that disclose your financial information of the schools, and there's a calculation that's done. And so this family makes about 100, 110. And so going to these kind of schools, the school will say, okay, based on this income, we're going to charge you $8,000 a year. That's $2,000 to $4,000 less than it costs to have a student living at home.
Mm-hmm.
So in this situation, going to some high-level prestigious private universities is actually less expensive than having your kid live at home. Because when you have a kid living at home, you have, the gas expenses of driving everywhere, the clubs and activities they're involved in, food, all those kinds of things. He always gives me a hard time because when I went to college, their food bill dropped by $600 a month. I was a high school athlete. I ate a lot. So
utilities also dropped.
Yep. So when you put those things into perspective and a student goes away, you can just redirect those costs for this family into paying for school, and you have no additional out-of-pocket expense. Whereas if you had a student, say, going to a community college or a state college living at home, you have those at-home expenses and then the expense of the community college and the state school. So in situations like that, you can pay for it out of pocket without any of the debt. However, that leads me into a couple of mistakes people make. The number one mistake people make, they don't do those applications. If you don't do those applications, whether you're low income, high income, people will miss out on that and they won't get those funds. And this system does not just apply to the super elite universities. This applies to regular private colleges, state schools, large and small, because these applications not only open up the large grant scholarships from the endowments, they also open up federal assistance, state assistance, local assistance, as well as several other different types of loans if you do need them for anything that the grants don't cover. So that's really how I want to start there is families need to understand first how these schools look at them and how they charge before we start thinking of, okay, you're going to end up with this large debt no matter what, because for most families, the large debt is unnecessary.
And the first form you're talking about comes October 1st of the senior year, called the FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Fill it out, even if you think you make too much money or you don't make much money at all. The second part of that, however, is understanding what goes into it. What assets count against financial aid and which ones do not. Some of the biggest mistakes we see is people put retirement assets down when retirement assets are exempt. Or I have investment property that I don't have it categorized as a business, that equity in that property counts against financial aid. All these things hurt you, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you've got to understand what actually makes up those forms. The other form Justin's talking about is called the CSS. Not all schools ask for that, but you can find that on their websites. They'll tell you that.
Okay. So FAFSA, I've definitely heard of that, and we have used it too. So having kids, you definitely know about that. But when you talk about the FAFSA, you brought up like really few good points there, not to include your retirement funds as an asset. So can you delineate like what things people should be putting as assets and what they can not put as assets while staying within whatever the application is asking for?
So where people get tripped up is on the sidebar when you fill out the FAFSA is there are instructions as to what does and does not go in those lines. But where the rub comes in is people start getting confused as to what actually falls under those descriptions. So to give you an example, the things that do count: cash, checkings, savings, investments / stock, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, the laundry list of everything you can think of, Bitcoin, all those things count. Now, where people misconstrue this is you can own those things in your own investment account, or you can own those things in a retirement account. And so on the form where it says, tell us what of those things you have that are not in retirement accounts, sometimes people misunderstand that these things are owned within the retirement account. And therefore, even though they are these stock, bonds, mutual funds, and so on, that because they're within the retirement account, they are exempt from the question. And that's where people really get it wrong. So if I was to summarize, so understanding that distinction, cash, checking, savings, stock, bonds, mutual funds, all those things. Investment property that is in your own name that is not organized within a business, the equity counts against you. Other things that can count against you, which this one will sting for some people, all your education savings accounts, the 529s, the Coverdales, all those things. And not just the ones for the student that's going to school, but all of them. If you have 5 kids and you have 5 529s, all 5 count against the first kid that's going if they're the only one in. So that can be a big sting, especially if you have a lot of savings for a lot of kids. That first kid is going to get hit pretty bad. So the things that do not count, retirement accounts, any stock, bonds, mutual funds, investments, any things like that are in the retirement accounts, IRAs, Roth IRAs, deferred plans, pensions, 401ks, all the annuities,
cash value life insurance,
547s, 403bs. Covered all the lists so that way anyone can hear. If something of that rings a bell, if it's within those accounts, it does not count. You don't have to put it down. The equity or value of the home you live in doesn't count. The value of your life insurance, even though life insurance can own stock, bonds, and things like that, those don't count. So making sure that you only add up the things that count is very, very important. Now, when you do the CSS, this other application that some schools can ask for, that thing will ask even more specific questions on the assets, but they will ask for the value of your 401ks and IRAs and retirement accounts and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean they are going to assess your retirement accounts. They'll also ask about the home you live in, the value, the mortgage, any seconds, all that stuff. And the reason being is those schools are trying to get a clear picture of what the FAFSA doesn't ask for. But just because they're asking for those things doesn't mean they'll assess them against you, because I've talked to some of these schools, and so has Jim, where when you talk to them and ask them, okay, we have this much in the equity of our home, we have this much in the value of our retirement accounts, they will give you, okay, up until this amount of your home, we won't count it. This amount of your retirement account, we won't count it. At some of these private schools, as of a couple of years ago, it was over $1 million of equity of house, 2.5 in a retirement account. So those are some good examples of what does and does not count in terms of assets.
But it also leads me into, over the years, one of the biggest mistakes people make. So when I talk to them and they have these assets set aside, let's say they have $150,000 in an investment asset, okay? And they ask them what the money is for, and they'll go, well, $100,000 of it is going to be for my retirement. Well, then put it in a retirement type of vehicle, because it's not going to count against financial aid. And if you leave it just as it is, it's going to count against financial aid. And don't have money in your kids' names. Everybody likes to set up these UTMA accounts, right? But they count 20% of those assets against the child's financial aid package. And we're talking free money here. We're not talking loans. All this financial aid we're talking about is free money.
And also keep in mind, when it comes to potentially having an asset in one place that's really supposed to be somewhere else, that's because most people are never exposed to the different tools that are out there. They're exposed to whatever their business provides. They're exposed to maybe if they have a financial advisor themselves, or their parents had someone, or they've just heard some advice on TV. That might be the only exposure they've ever had to it. They might not know what they can actually do with it, or they might want to keep it accessible for some reason. When you put all those things into context, we've had family members in some families pass away when the student is a senior about to go to college. And now all of a sudden these assets come in that they intend for some things, but the school can see them initially. We've talked to the schools before and said, okay, here's the way this family has come into these assets, but here's how they plan on using them. And they will actually give you feedback on, okay, if you do it that way, we assess this, we don't assess this, and they'll help you figure out what that updated number you're supposed to pay is. So it's not that we are gaming this system at all, because the schools are saying, as long as you have a balanced plan and you're not intentionally trying to hide money, for the most part, they're trying to really work with you. They're not trying to nickel and dime you for everything you've ever saved, but you also have to put in the work and make sure you're set up appropriately.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing, Justin and Jim, is that you could work with school's financial advisor and say that, hey, you know what, this is what we have in assets and how we can distribute it in the FAFSA or CSS. Is that right?
On that part, not entirely. And that's what kind of the strange part is. So let me give you an example of how that worked. So a couple of years ago, we had a student going to USC, and this one actually legitimately got in, no crew shenanigans or anything like that. And USC was great. They worked with us. But when the student got the financial aid package back, they were being charged full price. Whereas one thing I should mention is that every college is required to have something called a net price calculator on their website. And what the net price calculator does is it lets you do this calculation we're talking about in real time at every individual school. You put in your income, you put in the assets, the way I've been narrating in terms of what does and does not count. They will even have instructions there on how you fill it out. When you put this stuff in, they have to give you a realistic expectation of what you'll pay at that school. And so we had done that with this family, and they were supposed to get a little over $25,000 per year. So having done the research and the school's coming back saying, we're not going to give you anything, that's a red flag, because they're supposed to honor that. So when we initially addressed it with the financial aid office, the dad had a medical issue, had to retire, and so his retirement account rolled over. Well, there is a line in your taxes where it shows rollovers. It's not a taxable event. It's just a side line item. It's nothing that's in your taxable part. But the financial aid office saw the number, and just because they saw the number, they decided to assess it. It's in the rules on the IRS that that line is not something that you're supposed to be assessing. And yet they were still doing it. So I actually had to get the rules from the IRS to be able to show them and highlight for them what this really was about. So that part was kind of interesting. So when you mention you can work with the financial aid office about what you can do, they're more about assessing the ideas you give them and assessing your current situation. they're not about trying to help you find ways on terms of what you can do. For that, you really need to work with a financial professional that is educated and trained and licensed to interact and advise on those things, because you do need licenses to be able to give financial advice on those terms. So when you're dealing with the people at the financial aid office, they're not licensed like that. So they can't give you advice in terms of, well, you can put it here, you can put it there. That's not what they're trying to assess and help you with.
And there aren't a lot of us out there that focus on this area. Most financial planners will help you figure out a 529, how to save for it, a covered L and up my account, but they don't understand all the ins and out on that. So we even did a presentation for all the C-level and VPs of an organization, a financial company. And the first question I asked up front was how many you had high school age kids and how many you had kids in college already or graduated. And at the end of the presentation, we did our talk about what we had to do, all the stuff. Next question I asked at the end of it was, how many of you now realize you overpaid for college? And every hand went up. And these are people that are supposed to be experts in the field. It's not an area that a lot of people emphasize. We happen to emphasize it because we think it's a greater value to our clients.
No, definitely, because if, like you said, that, it's not about gaming the system, it's what you have. And if within the legal bounds, if you can save the money, why not?
Exactly.
So you also talk about entrepreneurs, that how entrepreneurs can use their business to help pay off their kids' colleges. Can you share a few strategies around that?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because first off, you have to understand, unless you have 100 employees or more in your company, they're not going to assess the value of your company. So that's important to understand. They also will assess, unfortunately, we're working on this through Congress right now called the STAR Act, but they will assess the money that you contribute to a retirement plan that year. However, as Justin mentioned earlier, they don't assess the money that's already in the account. So what you need to do as best you can is put money away. There are some strategies if your kids are involved in the business, how to put money away for them in a way that you can tap that for college without it counting against financial aid. So businesses, it's really interesting on how you put that money away and maybe make the kid an employee and have them do some work. And maybe you put that money away in a different type of an account for them that's not visible to the FAFSA, you just don't have access to it. The big key for financial planning for college, if you can get that money, then they're going to count it. Think of it that way, right? If you cannot get that money, it's not accessible, like a trust, an irrevocable trust or something like that, well, then it doesn't count because you don't have access to that money. And that's really where the schools will come down. There's 3 types of aid, right? So you got to think about as a business, should I have a retirement account for my kid? Why would I do that? Well, that isn't going to count, but I could get access to it, right? There's need-based money, purely about how much you can afford to pay. Merit-based, what I earned. I got a 4.0 in school, a 4.4. I participated in all the events. I became an officer. I'm a Gold Star Girl Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. All those things help you in terms of getting financial aid on the merit side. And the last one is unique ability. We all hear about unique ability, the sports scholarship, but there's music scholarships. There's, sports. Hockey's a great one, better than football for most people. So there's a lot of things out there that are available to the student to help them, and companies can think about it. A lot of companies set up funds that are set aside for employees. They apply, or their student has to do an essay or something. The company is going to go ahead and provide some access to a merit scholarship for that student. Okay, so a lot of small companies set it up, and their kids are eligible. So
one other that has come up fairly often, and we've talked to a few business owners, talked to several CPAs that advise this with small business owners, is paying this student an income because it's a tax deduction to the business, and oftentimes that kid is the kid has to do a real job for the money. They can't just be getting paid for no reason, obviously. Although for some people it's not so obvious, which is kind of funny to me.
You still want that work ethic.
Exactly. You want the work ethic. So if the student is doing work, you can pay them that certain income. Now, what people often miss is that because of how the financial aid works, once a student earns more than it goes up every year. This year, it's in and around about $6,800. When you start earning more than that, half of the student's income counts against financial aid. So I have known one CPA in particular is coming to mind where they have the business owners pay the student basically the equivalent of what the school costs, because then that school is a deduction to the family or through the business, as long as the student is doing, roughly enough work that is worthy of that funding. Now, if you're going to a school that doesn't give a lot of need-based financial aid, this is probably a very effective strategy, because you're getting tax benefits. The income from the paying for the school is taxed at a much lower level than it would be through the parents. So as long as the students are doing work and you're abiding by all the IRS rules, it's a legitimate idea. Yeah. If you're going to a school that offers need-based, you're cutting that need base in half by whatever you paid. So if you paid $30,000, you just cost yourself $15,000 in free money. So depending on the type of school that a family or a student is going to, the different strategies on how you do income through students, for instance, or even income through students for retirement accounts, can drastically affect the cost of your school. So just to circle back on how that works, for instance, you can summarize schools in 3 different categories. There is the need-based only type of schools. They only provide need-based. So, think of the Harvards, the Stanfords, the Yales, the Caltechs, but there's 139 schools in that list. It is not just the Ivy League level schools. So they offer only need-based. And the reason that is because these schools attract highly qualified students. So because they're highly qualified, they all have similar GPAs, similar test scores. You can't really differentiate between them in terms of their academic performance. So you just charge them based on basically making them all equal from a financial standpoint. If you can afford to pay, you pay. If you can't afford to pay, the school will pay. That's kind of how they work. The next level of schools are a combination of need and or merit. So, Notre Dame, USC, Penn State, big schools like that. Even UCLA to an extent works like this.
Even where you went, Brandeis
University, they work like that. They're kind of more need-based, but
fantastic. And we are very close to finishing at our show. So great information, guys. And from what it sounds like, you definitely know, and you would fall in the category of people working with those financial planners who are licensed. I'm assuming you guys are licensed and are aware and knowledgeable about the ins and outs of what colleges are looking for and how people can go about their college application strategies, right?
Yep. In fact, we came into so many issues with how families were trying to address this, because we do a free presentation about all this in a 45-minute presentation at local high schools. But we still saw a lot of families making a lot of mistakes from even the stuff we've discussed here. And so I wrote a book called College Bound Strategies. All of the tips that we're talking about, from selecting schools, how the application process works, when you should and shouldn't go to college and what makes it worth it or not, how to avoid the debt, how all this financial aid stuff works, how schools differentiate on how they give out money, all that can be found in the book College Bound Strategies. Our website, collegeboundstrategies.com, has the link to where you can buy the book on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and all those places. So in addition to us being licensed and being able to help people, we made a guide so that way people can have a resource they can buy and take home that will walk them through it if they want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And I'm assuming people can reach out to you through your website.
Absolutely. Our website has a contact page. If they want to ask us direct questions, they can do that. College Bound Strategies also has a Facebook page, facebook.com/College Bound Strategies. In there, you'll see a lot of different interviews from where we get to ask a lot of different questions. In addition, this one will be up there as well. So you can see some of our interactions, some of the questions we've answered. And if anyone wants to reach out directly, that's a great way to do it. Or the website has a contact page as well. One other place I want to mention is GoFundMe.com/College Bound Strategies, because we've also gone to high schools where they don't really let us tell this information to students. And it's mostly schools that have a lot of disadvantaged students, because as you mentioned before, if you're a disadvantaged student, your college is pretty much already free. And so I have a GoFundMe that raises money to buy these books and donate them to disadvantaged students in communities around the country. So if someone wants to be able to help students get access to this information, that's a great way they can contribute.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Justin and Jim, for sharing valuable strategies. And I'm sure a lot of parents out there will be able to take advantage of this.
Thank you. We certainly hope so.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. Reach out to us with stories or with needs or with what you're looking to learn or what you'd love to hear about. And you have been very, very open reaching out to me. So continue doing so. And of course, I wish you well and stay well. And I also want to thank Roxy for helping us out with the technology. And
you too. Thanks again.
And take
Thank
care
you,
until
Roxy.
next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week, Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.